Helo, croeso, a diolch yn fawr iawn I bawb am dod I ymuno fy ni hyn yma. Just to say thank you to everyone for joining us and welcome to you all to the second talk that's to coincide with our members exhibition transition. So I ddweud diolch I chi a croeso I chi ar sgwrs, yr ail sgwrs ydyn ni efo arddangosfa aelodau, da ni aelodau ni bob blwyddyn sef Trawsnewid. So, fel ydych chi'n gwybod, dwi'n mynd I fod yn gwneud hwn yn dwyieithog, ond dwi'n meddwl fod Rita a Gareth mynd I fod yn gwneud o'n dwyieithog hefyd, ond mae Peter mynd I fod yn uniaith Saesneg. So, just I ddeud chi'r trefn y noson. So, mae gennym ni cychwyn efo gyda Gareth, Griffith, a wedyn fyddwn ni efo Peter Lewis a wedyn Rita and Jones. Os ydych chi eisiau gofyn cwestiynau yn ystod yr sgwrs o gwbl, just rhowch rhywbeth yn y chat neu yn y box Q&A a fyddai'n gofyn ar ôl pawb deud I darnau. Just to let you know, the order of the evening is we're going to have Gareth Griffith first, followed by Peter Lewis, and then Rita Ann. And then if you want to ask any questions, we're going to be letting them do the presentation for about 10 minutes in their talk, and then you can ask questions afterwards. To do that, you need to do it in either the chat box or the Q&A. So do that, and I'll be asking them the questions afterwards. And as I said, this is talks by our members about some of the work they've got in the exhibition, as well as their work in general. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand you over to Gareth Griffith. Ti'n barod, Gareth?
Yeah. Noswaith I, Bob. Good evening, everybody. Well, I've got some work in the current, which is called transition. But I think that all art is really transitional, in as much that you're always looking and re-evaluating and so on. And particularly with my work, perhaps, in as much that, I tend to look at, recycle my own work. And, so I even had to ask Mena earlier what my titles were, really, because I'd forgotten, because I often change the titles as well. So everything's in a state of transition. But, Mena, if you could show the first one that's in the show, which is called Thank You, Kurt. I don't know if that's being viewed now, but essentially, this is saying thank you and hello and a tribute to Kurt Schwitters, who was basically the father of installation art. And as early as 1919, he said, he was one of the founders, or the founder initially, of the Dada movement in Germany after the First World War. And so he invented a whole kind of new way of thinking called, or philosophy, called mers, was basically translated into rubbish or everything. And he said the word mers denotes essentially the combination of all conceivable material for artistic purposes, and technically the principle of equal evaluation of the individual materials. And then he goes on to say that you can use anything to make art, anything at all, cotton wool, wire mesh, whatever. So is this now artists, this is part of our heritage. And so it's basically saying thanks to Kurt. Now, it's in 3 layers, or 4 perhaps. The one right at the back where you can see the guy's hair, and just on a bit of his shoulder, was the first attempt to make a portrait of him. So that wasn't working out at all. So I started another one and kind of went, finished it a little, apart from his left eye, right eye, his right eye. Mainly, I think, because I couldn't match it up properly. So I just left it and it looked okay. So I just happened to put the one on the top on top of the one that I wasn't pleased with. And I thought, oh, that looks okay. Then I'd done that little circular head there, which bears no relation to the other two, because they're essentially, trying to make a portrait of Kurt Schwitters. So I put that on. And then there's the postcard, which is of him reading, that several shots of him reading a Merz poem called Ursonate. And all it consists of is kind of guttural sounds like, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And you can almost match the sounds to the photographs. So that's it. That's what that's about. The word hetty is something else, is not part of it. That's on the wall behind there. So essentially that's what it is. And then if you could go to the other one that's in the show, called what do I call it again? The Elder and Susanna. Well, Susanna and the Elder is a biblical story depicted by many artists. I think Titian did one, and Tintoretto, and so on and so on. And it's about a group of licentious old men tricking Susanna into getting undressed as she bathes, telling her to go and bathe in the stream. And it's a theme that perhaps, I'm 80 this year, so, there's an element of humor in my work, but also there's kind of like a bit of a narrative, a storytelling about my own life and so on. But essentially those bits, I was in Lidl a few weeks back, and a guy was taking the posters down, and the posters, there's about 10 layers of posters, and you can see that on the one on the woman, the profile of the woman on the right. So I got a whole pile of them. I've got a lot of them in the studio now, and I started drawing on them. And I can't remember when I started. I think I did the woman's head first, and then I did that's a self-portrait of me there on the left, and they were just drawings in themselves. So I put them together and gave them a title because it reminded me a little bit of an old man, looking at a young woman and so on, whatever. And so that's basically it. But it obviously links with Schwitters, the way he used to tour the city in Hanover and pick up where he lived before he had to flee to this country from the Nazis via Norway. And so that's essentially what those two pieces, not what they're about. You can put whatever meaning you can to them. But I'm always looking at art, and always, because I think it's a very important dialogue that, so I'm very fond of a whole range of artists that are totally unconnected with each other. So, Kurt Schwitters openly being one of them. Another artist is called, what's his name? I've forgotten his name now. I can't remember his name now. But anyway, wide range of Sickert, that's it. Fancy me forgetting Sickert. So, you think of sacred and shwit as no possible link between them in terms of, but the only link is that they connect with me in some shape or form. So I don't know how I'm going up. Just a little bit more, I think. Menna, if you could put that image of Bertarelli up, please. Yeah. Now this one is quite a big piece, and it's got lots of different, a much more complicated one, but essentially, it's a more you can view the things all individually, and then they make a cohesive whole. First of all, when I'm making something, I'm not driven by trying to make a composition. So with that big piece there, I started with one thing and painted that, and then there was all the expanse of the rest to fill in, as it were. So, but they all relate to things that I have made, or because that's a kind of, I suppose you can identify me by now of, making something and painting an image of it. Okay, so I can't remember really which one I started off with, but you can see that there's a framed collage underneath. Now that comes from a shop in Carnarvon where I grew up called Bertarelli's ice cream and tea shop. A lovely place run by Italians who'd come over from Italy pre-war, I think, not after the war, pre-war. And so I messed about with it. It shows the king and queen there, of the royal family that existed then. And then I think I started the one on the big square piece after that. Basically it's a painting of that. And then on the left rather, there's a ship that I made resting on a book of Homer's Odyssey. Then I painted that ship, and so on and so on. Now then, in the box on which the shape I made on the left, there's a little blue head made out of plasticine. Now, I didn't make that. My son Johan made that for his GCSE exam. And it's a portrait of his grandfather, my father. And it's been kept all these years. So this is the way I've appropriated that. So I've put the box plus a photograph of me inside when I was 20, I think. And alongside that is the painting of the box and so on. So, and then there's the gloves. When I do some work in the garden, I use gardening gloves. But I found these particularly, they're fantastic gloves, and I just painted them. So it kind of tells the story. And sometimes I use found objects. I'll finish now. I use found objects, but the found objects are quite often very personal to me, that people have given me, like my granddaughter or granddaughters have given me things which I've utilized and made, my son and so on, and sons rather, and so on and so on. So that's a kind of overview of the way I work, I think. Okay, Menna?
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Gareth. Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah. Okay.
Os oes gen rwy'n cwestiynau neu sylwadau, rhowch nhw yn y chat neu yn y box Q&A ar y gwylod, neu lle bynnag da chi'n gweld nhw ar y sgrin i chi. If you've got any questions or comments to make about Gareth's work or his presentation, please do so in the chat. So far, Gareth, we've got one from Jan Gardner saying that it's very enlightening and fascinating about your work. So that's all
no
we've
questions.
No questions at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, from Rita. Diolch, Rita. Question saying, do you think it's important for the audience to know the story?
Well, I mean, I've just told you the story, really, or the way it's put about. I think the artist has got to, almost a duty to sort of take part in sort of, giving out, But, to quote an artist, Picasso, he said, I find, I don't see. You know what I mean? So I think that essentially, it's up to the viewer to try and sort it out, because it's a matter of how things, you find things, and it might bring might resonate with you personally. Do you know what I mean? Because we're all share this planet and we've got common experiences. But I think by now, I think it's quite important really to have a dialogue with whoever curated the show and so on. This is what I'm doing. The three of us are doing tonight, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth. I've had a couple of comments and questions since then, so I'll ask you them. So first comment is gwaith gaga. I'm sure you know who's that from. And another one saying, hynod o ddifyr, so ni methu gwrando arno fo trwy'r dydd. Diolch, Shari. A wedyn, question, Gareth. If you could collaborate with another artist, who would it be? And then it says, obviously, collaborate or use your family as inspiration.
Yeah. Well, talk with another artist. Does he have to be alive?
I don't know. It's not been said that. So I think maybe
I don't know. I'd like to talk with lots. This is going to sound hellishly posy, but I think you kind of talk with them in a way when you look at them, and I tell you what, who I would really like to talk to, or rather listen to, because from what he's written and talked about, he must have talked a mile a minute, and that's Philip Guston. I think I'd like to talk to.
Okay.
Yeah. American painter Philip Guston. Yeah. There's loads of people. Yeah, there's loads of people I've seen on Facebook. I'd like to actually talk and meet certain artists whose work I admire. My contemporaries who've said, "Oh, I like that," and I said, "I like that." I'd like to talk to them as well and meet them. It's fantastic, yeah. Well, I'd like to talk to somebody who hates my work as well. Anyway.
Yeah. We've got a few more as well. So what's your main medium for painting?
Well, I use any kind of paint, but mainly oil paint, really. But I use house paint and enamel and so on. Yeah. Sometimes mixed all together. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry?
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay.
Then in arall, I really enjoyed that. What do you think? Is the work about difference between remembering and knowing? By Alec. Thanks, Alec.
Is that a question or a statement?
Well, he says afterwards, the reason I asked because the way you describe it sounds like an episodic memory.
Well, it is in a way, because, it is episodic, because when you look at your work, sometimes it becomes a series. And the way my studios are set up, I put things on the wall, and so you see them all the time. But also, what I do very often, I have an ambition to make a big installation, and that would be great, and just let it react and change it all the time. But I do use some of my old works to put into something I'm doing, which is kind of installational, but of something of my own and other people's work, like Johan's Blue Head, yeah. But, there's one I did of myself swimming. in the Caribbean that I've used for another piece. Yeah. So it kind of tells the story in that way. But I'm always, I use everything and anything. Everything's grist to the mill, as it were.
Great, yeah, Gareth. And just a couple more quickly before we move on. The Tracy Simpson said from the photograph of the blue head, from the image, as it were, it looks like a portrait of switches with lots of synergy between the images. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay, and then
if it does, yeah.
And then another one from Karen Rosen. Can you let me know what Richard's philosophy is?
Well, essentially, it was that I've just written out. Everything is fair game. Everything that can be. It's not. I've just said, that artists now use anything to hand, right? And Kurt Schwitters wasn't the actual first guy. Picasso was said to be the first guy who started to use actual materials and some of his paintings and so on. So there was this huge inquisitive time, where it was like the Renaissance at the beginning of the last century. It really was, But, if you follow the line all the way back down to the cave art and so on, because everything is linked up, So now we're the fact that we're talking about art on this Zoom thing tonight, is part of it, isn't it? And so yeah. I've forgotten the question, really, so I rambled on a bit.
It's okay, don't worry about it. Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, Gareth. We're going to move on, but if anybody does have any more questions or comments for Gareth, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments or the chat even. But I'll come back to him after we've spoken with Peter and Rita. Okay, diolch yn fawr, Gareth. So the next person who's going to talk is Peter. So person nesaf sy'n mynd I siarad ydy Peter Lewis. He's fairly new to the membership and Toucan, but he's been got some interesting work. So there's a piece of work in the exhibition that's ceramic, which looks 2D almost to begin with, until you look at it from the side and see that it's very much not 2D. I'll let Peter talk for the rest of it now. Diolch.
What I'd like to do is to start by talking about the last 3 years of my work, which is the period from when I left the university where I was working, and had the opportunity to reconsider the way in which I produced art and the previous work that I'd been doing. And rather than change anything from previously, I was just thinking about a different way of thinking how art could be created and made. A lot of my previous work has been political, and I'm not going to talk so much about that, but what I'm going to talk about is, and I'll get to the transition piece halfway through, I hope. So to begin with, I was talking to a colleague about either micromanaging your work, how you produce artwork. And I've almost a very OCD, strategy of working where I have a predetermined end, and I've got a very micromanaged way of getting there. And I was introduced to a book, which was a catalogue. And the catalogue is, you can see that. The catalogue is an aside, which is written or curated by Tacita Dean, and it was an exhibition at the Whitechapel Gallery in London. I didn't see the exhibition, actually, because it was some time ago, but I've read the catalogue, and there's a whole forward here, and which is really interesting, but a couple of sentences stood out. And one of the sentences was about how she curated the exhibition. Nothing is more frightening than not knowing where you're going. But then again, nothing can be more satisfying than finding you've arrived somewhere without any clear idea of the route. And that kind of struck me as a mortifying way of trying to produce art or think about art, because I'm so used to being in so much control of it. And later on, she concurs with a statement by Andre Breton when he spoke of the objective chance process being about external circumstances acting in response to the unspoken desires and demands of the human psyche. So that kind of made me think that I would want to try different ways of creating art in terms of an unfettered approach, really, without planning too much ahead. And like Gareth, I like to collect things from flea markets, second-hand shops, anything that I see that might be of interest. And there's a reason I do that, but I just think that things that you find that have been discarded in a way are often really interesting objects. I'm going to share the screen there and see if I can pick up on the first images. Let's share the desktop. Here we go. So the first image is, well, it was a series of I was in a junk shop and I saw 3 plates, and they were produced by Royal Doulton, and they had images on of Canada and these sort of fantastic vistas of landscapes, of water, you know, that Canada is as a country. And it suddenly, you know, occurred to me that where we live in North Wales as well is such a fantastic environment and rich in its natural beauty. And I often go for walks and collect things as well on my walks, on the beach, off the Little Orme, the Great Orme, different places. So I was looking at the plates and I thought, well, it seemed to me that the objects that I picked up, this is a jawbone from the Great Orme. And it was a kind of serendipity or a playfulness way in which I wanted to approach making these things. So these are painted enamels onto the surface of the plate and then fired to about 800 degrees, and they become permanent. So they become part of the plate. So they're the same, one and the same. And if I can work through these, this I found on Llandudno Beach. And the interesting fact was that there's, it still had its homing, it's a homing pigeon or a racing pigeon. It still had its tag on its leg, but there was nothing there, only the leg. I looked at the landscape and just superimposed that on the top. The next one along, that I found on Ross-on-Sea Beach, and it's one of those skate or rhai pouches, egg pouches, where the rays or the skates eggs hatch inside and then emerge from them. And it kind of finished it, and it looked like some crazy animal that was swinging through the trees. But I really did want to try and think about a different way of interpreting the work, because a lot of the work I'd produced before had a particular message that I wanted to communicate. And this seemed to me to be a different way of exploring what art can communicate or how you can produce art. And those are the 3 plates together. And it wasn't until I looked at the 3 plates together that I realized there's no humans in this. And there was all aspects of the natural world, whether it was birth or mortality or rebirth. And it was a little bit of reflection and standing back from the work that you produce. So not having a constructive way in which I was going to make it, but allowing the work to sort of emerge and then reevaluating it and see how it communicated something back. And of course, to other people, it's important as well, because I think their experiences and lives and biography of their life, how they understand something would perhaps superimpose a different meaning to me, and as to how they understand it differently to me, or I don't know. But that was a series of plates. And then, oh yeah, here we are. And then I went to China in 2019, to Beijing, for an art residency in Redgate Art Gallery in Beijing. And I spent a month, the month of July, at the residency, and then all of August traveling around some different parts of China. And I adopted a similar kind of strategy. I took some catalogues from the University of Bolton Library, which they were throwing out. There were 1960s catalogues of exhibitions in Manchester, and they were just going to bin them. So I took the catalogues from them, and I took some of them with me to China, and I started cutting them up and using them. And this window, or little door, the apartment I was staying in Beijing had, at the end of the kitchen, I noticed, after a couple of days living there, I noticed there was this little window door. So I opened it, and there was nothing there. There didn't even seem to be a tap behind it, which might have been a stop tap or anything. There was nothing. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So I started inserting different images that I cut out of the magazine. And I didn't really know much about the person that I pushed in there, and I could open the door on him and close it. It turned out that after some further investigation that it was he was a black actor, Ira Aldridge, and he had a fascinating history. And with current Black Lives Matter, it seems to have become kind of more interesting to me. Every time I look at it, it's quite, I mean, an interesting image for me in that sense. Moving on. Yeah, so again, in Beijing, I started collecting objects anywhere in the marketplace, gift shops, anything that struck me as being a bit unusual. This was a monkey on a horse. I had no knowledge of what that might symbolize, but I found this kind of a painting, no, it's a print, it was an etching of some kind. It looks like somewhere in the Netherlands or Europe. So it was about, the thing I did trying to do here was that I got European imagery from these catalogues, but I wanted to use cultural icons or symbols from China and try and marry the two. So just in an experimental way, using some European cultural references and superimposing Chinese cultural symbols or references as well. And I think that's how my work from the residency over the last couple of years or year and a half is developed. So I've carried on after the residency finished. And that's another, I think that's Mozart. And the picture itself, again, is edited out of an exhibition catalogue. And the clay is superimposed, and these have become digital prints eventually. Right. So stop sharing. There we are. So I hope you can see me again. Now, the things that I collected after finishing the residency in Beijing, I then headed off to Shanghai, Hangzhou, Huangshan, Jingdezhen, and Xi'an City before heading back to Wales. And en route, wherever I was, I spent some time having a look at what was available in junk shops and other places, secondhand shops. And I came across some fascinating things that I thought, I didn't know how I was going to use them, but one of the things I came across was this, which I picked up I picked this up in Beijing, I think, just before I left. And it's a storybook. But the interesting thing was it was printed in 1982 in China. It's all Chinese. But when I opened it, I discovered that most of the story is very British. And the story's about a bunch of travellers who arrive in the village. And there they are in one pane. And then on the other side are the police and the local councillors telling them that The rules are no littering, no fighting or stealing. And the whole book goes through. I've got a scan on my phone, and I can translate all the text. So this story goes on. There's a bit of romance between the villagers and the travellers, but it was peculiar because it seemed to be the thing that I was looking to try and put together between two cultures already existed. I just found this. So I thought, well, here it is. And then further on in the story, there's a bit of romance with one of the local guys. And there he is. And that's the image that's on the piece. And he's hanging out by his petrol pump, which is I remember these about the 1970s, VIP petrol pumps. And he's calling across to the girl on the bicycle. So that's one item. And then I came across another book, which was this one. And I picked that up in Shanghai. And that's how to paint communist posters. And it gives you celebrated artists who've produced communist posters in the revolution, Cultural Revolution, 66 to 76. And these have formed a lot of sort of my practice as well since I've come back. So they're of little value there, but they do stick quite a price on if you're a visitor, because they know you're going to pay a bit more than anybody else. So, and then the final thing that I bought in Shanghai was this, and this was quite a poignant find, really, because it's the communist textile worker union card of this woman. And she's paid all her union dues as she's worked in the factory. I think they're not there. There they are. So they're stamped, and she's paid them all in full. And her name was Zhou Langying, born in 1931. But I felt quite sad in a way that somebody's life in this book or object, I considered it to be an object really, is being discarded. And that value, the value of something, to me is quite an interesting concept. How we value something, how we place a financial amount on like Banksy's parody of Claude Monet's water lilies, which sold for 7.5 million today, and the value of somebody's life that's recorded in her union booklet. So I brought all these back with me. I'm hoping not running into time. I'll speed up a little bit. So screen share. Let's desktop. Here we go. There we are. So that's the guy in the little booklet, the Chinese booklet, and the story. And again, the frame I picked up in Craigadon in a second-hand shop in Llandudno. And so it's an assembly of things, really, images, objects. And again, as Mena said, when you look at it from the side, it sticks out from the frame. I'm not sure why it shouldn't anyway, but paintings never do. But so I was able to use, I bought one of those seals, a Chinese seal. Again, they're from a second-hand shop. And I was using that on the side of the object and the base to impress. And almost, I suppose it's an aesthetic decision between the frame itself and the surface of that. But particular decorative features or items sort of give you a clue as to where they may have come from. And heading into the final pieces, Now, that was the Union card. And also what I do is I collect things from the secondhand shops, whatever they are. I collect vases, all sorts of ceramic things, which I might break up to use in artwork. But I wanted to use something particularly European, which this form is. And I found it in Llandudno, in a St. David's Hospice shop it was. I got the vase. I made a 3-piece mold of it, and then I cast several of these forms in clay and used them as vehicles for these images that I collected in China. The actual vase is here, and there it is. Oh, you can't see that, can you? Let me go back. Stop share. So. Now can you see it? Right, okay. So that's the vase. It was 20 quid from a second-hand shop with a romantic picture of a couple who look like they're from the aristocracy. But that's the original one. And the beauty is that once you've got the mould, you can make 50 of these and use them in all sorts of different ways if you want. So I'll go back to share quickly. Oh yeah, there we are. Share. Right, so there we are. Moving down one. I think is that the last one? Let's have a look. Oh, there we are. It's just a close-up. Yeah. So the other thing about this was that she might still be alive, and that resonated with me in the fact that she would be 89 if she was. But I like the fact that through ceramics and through vase, I mean, it's covered in gold. It's a kind of elevation of trying to elevate a status of something or somebody that's been discarded, and in a way it makes me think, well, you know, it should be elevated to a new status and presented as something which can be put out again into the public arena and doesn't have to exist in some old dingy shop in the back streets of Shanghai. And it just kind of fascinates me that she doesn't know it, but if she's still alive, she's on a pot in the UK, well, in Wales, which I kind of enjoy thinking about. That's the last one. And that comes from the book about propaganda painting, which was a whole industry in the Cultural Revolution. Nobody ever looks directly at you. They're all looking away at this utopian dream of the communist future and the proletariat and taking control. So, the vase comes again from a charity shop, and it's another kind of typical European decorative form, and combining or merging those two elements together was something that I've just carried on with since the residency. I hope it didn't take too long. So that's it, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. That was really interesting. We've had a few questions in already, so I'll ask you them. So what was your interest for the residency in China, and was it the ACW, Arts Council, funded project?
It was funded by Wales Arts International, and I did a residency in Australia, in New South Wales in 2011, and in Newcastle it was, about 3 hours north of Sydney. And I always find that, I found that experience really helped focus on art practice, and it was a catalyst for other work. And so when I had the opportunity, as soon as I wasn't tied to the university, I was able to make a decision. And I like to go to different places. especially, you know, I'm fascinated by China, never been. And I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be fantastic to experience and try somewhere? I've worked in the Middle East, and that's another completely different part of the world. So I like to go and see things. Like Gareth, I like to look at art a lot. I'd see as much art as I can. So the reason for China was, again, I'd like to go to Iran, but, you know, I'd just like to go to places which probably are different to where we are, and to see, I mean, we're forever being told how, you know, the bogeymen are these particular countries, but when you go there, you find the people are generally like us. They've got a family, they want a life, they want a job, put food on the table. And so, yeah, China, why not? Fantastic place.
Oh, thank you. And we've had a few comments, so I'll just read them out for you. So objective chance is a great concept. Like Gareth, you two are a magpie. I enjoy your assemblage approach. Use of found objects to make new works and query cultural customs.
Yeah.
That's a comment from Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
And then Rita has said beautiful work. And then from Alec, which was one of our artists who were talking last week, you say combining and merging, which I have to say is highly successful, but I feel they reveal or maintain paradoxes rather than merge them. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the way they're put together is often they're disparate. They start out as being disparate things, separate. So although I say a marriage or to combine, they generally work against each other. Well, I hope they do in greater or lesser degrees. But yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, thank you. And he says you do it so well. And just one final question we had so far. So what was your job at the uni, Jan?
I taught on the fine art degree programme, and we had a public art MA and a fine art MA. So I was a lecturer on both of the programmes. But I always maintained a professional practice. I thought it was important, if you're going to be teaching students, that you've got to be active yourself. And you know, when I wasn't, any time I got, I was in my own workshop doing things, or going off in the summer to do things. So that was my role at the university. But I commuted from Wales for 27 years. I didn't want to live in Bolton, so I couldn't leave this area, really. Never been able to for long.
That rhai that calls you back.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And besides being by the sea, even when I went to do my foundation in Wrexham, in the art school, I was always looking over the next hill to see the sea.
Yeah. And then Rita's asked, do you give a talk in Aberystwyth International Ceramic Festivals a few years ago? Because I think your political plates inspired my work on the BA.
I've been there a few times, and I've had a work exhibited in Aberystwyth and at the Ceramics Festival, but I've never spoken there. But they could be. I'm just thinking that could be Paul Scott, maybe. Not sure.
Okay.
Could be.
Okay. Thank you. Again, just one more comment. Very inspiring, and saying thank you to you.
Thank you.
I just got one more question here. What's to say? Jan Gardner just asked, where have you been hiding?
Well, maybe mainly on the M56 and M6 and M62, but...
Okay, thank you very much. Again, everyone, if you've got any more questions or comments about Peter's work or Gareth's work, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. But we're going to move on to Rita otherwise and ask questions at the end. Ti'n barod, Rita? Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Okay, so dwi'n mynd I gyflwyno chi Rita wan. I'm going to introduce you to Rita. Rita's she's one of our core members, and she's been with us from the start. So we're always happy to support and have Rita as part of our group and to do something. She's got 3 pieces in the exhibition. So for those of you who have been, she's got pieces, they're all mixed medium. They're called Breathe, Madness and Needs Must. So yeah, I'll give you over to Rita.
Okay, I'm going to screen share most of my talk because everything's on presentation. So hopefully it works. Right, first. The first image on your left is not actually a piece in the show, but the other 2 are. So I like to work and use everyday materials, from found objects, collected stuff, even things I buy off the shelf, which grab my interest because of either their form, the colour, texture or material. But this year has been a strange year and very thought-provoking time, which possibly could have transitioned my way of working and the materials I use. So on slide 2, I don't know if you can see the writing. So the first piece is called Madness, which is a crocheted virus in very colourful yarn. The irony here is that it's filled with toilet paper instead of normal filling. This mainly was because I couldn't get usual stuffing for things like this. So I considered the madness that was going on, all the shop shelves that were empty and toilet paper being the most vital commodity at the time. I thought it was a bit funny to use my toilet paper to fill up this object, a bit like hiding it from everybody else so they couldn't get it, but I knew where to find it, if you like. It was inspired a lot by the work. My doodles, I make very organic and possibly virus-shaped drawings and colouring them in. And also, just at the beginning of March, I'd been to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park and seen the work of Joanna Vasconcelos, who uses a lot of similar materials, found objects, shiny and what you might call women's work. So, yeah, that's just another photograph. And I think because this is important in this slide, because we had a lot of time to reflect and consider what was important. It certainly wasn't toilet roll. This second piece is called Breathe. And after that last slide, I think it should be called And Breathe, because it's a self-meditative, self-calming piece. Again, I'm working with irony. It looks like 19 ice cream cones. 19 refers to COVID-19, of course. And the ice cream look or style came about because I was playing with paper and trying to create the Black Death mask, the beak shape. And whilst making this and listening to the news and becoming fearful and thinking of the things I was going to miss out, because I think at the time they closed off the beaches. I was missing the beaches, and I had a bit of a hiraeth about all that. And I was thinking, how are we going to have fresh air if we have to stay in the house? We can't go for walks. And because I like working with plastic bags, I've always got them in my studio space. This is another piece I've done this year in Plasbodfa, using plastic bags for a different message, if you like. It's more about pollution in the water, very political, but this is quite fun and possibly taking you to another space, another place. It's a responsive, site-specific, responsive piece, I think. And the transition, I suppose, is the contradictory use of my plastic bags in the work. Like I said, usually they're used for a political or social issue, usually female, feminist, women's work, and possibly craft style frowned upon pieces. Previously in like this one, and this one site-specific work, one in the castle and one at gyfle. They are knotted pieces of plastic bag, creating a feel of tension and mental and physical barriers in the space they are shown in. But what's handy about, what I really like about using this material is it's reusable, can take all sorts of different shapes and forms, and is suitable for inside gallery space, wall, if you like, as well as site-specific. This is the third piece. It's called Needs Must, and this again refers to my need to reuse and recycle everyday household items, usually mundane objects centered around women's work, or domestic work, if you like. This piece again has a sense of self displayed in a way that looks like DNA, the DNA helix made of orange netting that comes packaging for oranges, yarn which has been weaved through the holes and crocheted around the edges. I think it represents my DNA, and that's why I've chosen this way of displaying it, because I feel the way I work, my art practice is to reuse materials, again, like Gareth and Peter have mentioned, the need to collect stuff, find another use for them. Don't discard everything. There's like an alternative use for everything. And as long as the object itself turns out to be quite colourful, I'm happy. So that's the third piece, just to give you a little insight to the types of work I do. Quite a bit of work created really this year, even though I haven't had the opportunity to show it. This was installed a week before lockdown, so only a handful of people have seen it. It's called Moving, and it's like a protective furniture packaging fabric you get for moving house. And it's placed on a bed frame and actually stitched down and knotted with yarn into the little square, so you can virtually see the metal frame behind the fabric. There is again a personal reference in this with the sticks on the folded top part, and those sticks have been wrapped again in a different coloured string, which gives it all like something's being protected, something's being kept safe. And I believe this is reference to my family and my emotions. I am actually in the middle of my MA course in Glyndŵr University, and last module I started creating these pieces, found objects again, taking elements from the landscape, still working with wrapping items up, stitching them, and applying these found objects to those pieces. And I think that is it. So I'll stop sharing. I'll say thank you very much for listening.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Rita. Thank you, Rita. So we've got a few comments and a few questions, so I'll ask you them.
Oh.
So we've got from Jan Gardner saying, most lovely, really honest and a true message. Love it. And then from Peter, we've got, can you expand on the comment about craft and how you said it could be frowned upon?
I think it comes from that elitist group of art people who could sneer and make such comments about women's handmade products. I've heard it myself that it shouldn't be on the art platform, if you like. It's more of a craft and a skill that women have learned over the years, and but I think it's got as much place on the art scene as anything else.
Does that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
I agree.
And then we've had a couple more comments. Love the packing fabric blanket piece from Tracy. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
And Shari says, gwaith, chwaraeus iawn. Diolch, Shari. And then Jan Gardner said, upon the question that Peter was asking, that can happen within art as well.
Yeah.
Agree with that.
Usually female art.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Mr. Anthony Morris. So you mentioned the need to protect. Does mental health and well-being filter into your work?
Yes, Anthony, you know me so well.
So thank you everyone for taking part. I'll just see if we've got, Anthony says sorry.
It's okay.
I just thought it's been great meeting. I know Rita very well, but it's the first time I've met Peter, and I very much enjoyed both your talks, and I've seen Peter's work before, and it was great finding out, more about him and his the way he gets things done. And I think there's a common thread running through the work is that we're all reacting to being alive and trying to explain ourselves, and particularly now. I'd just like to add, really, though, that, and again, I don't want to sound kind of pretentious, but I don't really think of myself as making art, or I try not to make art, as it were, if you see what I mean.
Very dada.
It's kind of like, Okay, wel, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi de.
Thank you.
Just i ddeud diolch yn fawr iawn gyda ni yn Carn, ac diolch yn fawr iawn I chi am gymryd rhan, de. thank you to you all for taking part.
Yeah, Minna.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone.
Yeah,
been good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Menna, for setting it up.
thank you, Menna.